I want to begin my sermon with a story that comes from both the Hindu and the Buddhist traditions, which I first heard from my rabbi and my teacher, Rabbi Michael Marmer. A group of blind men discovered a new strange animal called an elephant. And they all went over to the elephant to try to get a sense of what it was like. The first went over to its trunk, felt around it, said, "Ah, an elephant is like a thick, slithering snake." The next, who had found a tusk, said, "No, the elephant is very much like a sharp spear." The next man, who had made his way to one of its legs, said, "I don't think so. An elephant is more like a tall, sturdy tree." The next, who happened along its side, said, "No, no, no. An elephant is like a broad and high wall." And the last one, unfortunately for him, somehow found his way right between the tail. He took a deep breath, looked around, and said, "Are we talking about the same animal?" I thought it was funny. Thank you. What this story illustrates, of course, is that we all live a life that leads us to a certain understanding of the world. We can be quite certain that our perception is correct. After all, that tusk really did feel like a spear. But when we limit our interactions to people who share our perspective, our partial view obscures a more nuanced truth. In America in 2025, so often we only have real conversations with people touching the same part of the elephant as we are. Not only are we siloed by political opinions, not only are we divided, but more and more as Americans, we view people on the other side of the aisle as immoral. According to a Pew study, wide majorities in both parties say that people in the other party are more close-minded. And approximately half of both Republicans and Democrats view members of the other party as more immoral than other Americans. But in this era of social media, of unfriending people whose views upset us, of curating our news through Twitter and Substack, or only watching MSNBC or CNN or Fox News, too often we just shut out the other side completely. So we don't hear their argument at all. Because it has become ever more evident that the other side is just not like us. They are different. They are other. They are bad. How many of you, raise your hands, have lost friendships over politics or over something someone has posted on social media in the last few years? Don't lie to the rabbi on Rosh HaShanah. I know it is almost all of us in these last few years. This phenomenon, this division, is playing out in the Jewish community as well. According to the most recent Pew study of American Jewry, it is more important to American Jews that their current or future grandchildren share their political convictions than it is for their grandchildren to be Jewish. Let me say that again. It is more important to American Jews that their current or future grandchildren share their politics than it is for them to be Jewish. It is truly remarkable. It is shocking, even, that for so many American Jews, our political identities, progressive, conservative, MAGA, are more important to us than our identity as Jews. This piece of ourself that has crossed oceans and spanned centuries, and that so many of our spiritual ancestors died for. On the other hand, it makes total sense. If we see people that we disagree with, even other Jews, as morally corrupt, it's only logical that our political tribe takes precedence over our commitment to the tribe. Our politics have gotten so sectarian, so scorched earth, that at times it really does feel like a tribal conflict, violence and all. If we can't be in conversation, relationship, or community with people we disagree with, if we think that not only they are wrong, but evil, it is no surprise that violence has been the outcome. It's been terrifying, tragic, at times enraging, always disheartening to see so much political violence, even in just the last year or so. 2 assassination attempts on President Trump, the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, the firebombing of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence, the murder of Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, the firebombing of the Run for Our Lives protest in support of Israeli hostages in Boulder, the murder of Minnesota State Rep Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark in their home, and the murder of Charlie Kirk 2 weeks ago, less than an hour from where you are sitting. In a country founded on tolerance, whose original motto, E pluribus unum, out of many one, it still adorns our seal and our currency. How have we gotten to this dark place? How can we not see that even people with diametrically opposed views to our own, that they are at least still touching the same elephant as we are? More importantly, how might we begin to bridge this gap, to heal the rift dividing our society? We can start by shifting the way that we view and understand the morality, the moral compass of the people we disagree with. The psychologist Jonathan Haidt, professor of ethical leadership at NYU's Stern School of Business, who studies the psychology and evolutionary roots of morality, he's found that it's not that either liberals or conservatives are more moral than the other. It's that they define what is quote unquote moral in different ways. According to his research, and this is a little tricky, so try to follow along. It took me, I had to read it a couple times myself, but this is what he says, that there are 5 moral foundations common to all human cultures. The first moral foundations are caring for others and reducing harm, that's 1, and 2, fairness. And while both liberals and conservatives care about these 2, liberals tend to care about them more. But the last 3 moral foundations that all societies share, liberals tend not to care about much at all, but conservatives do. These are valuing loyalty to one's own group, respect for authority and institutions, and purity or sanctity. Professor Haidt's lens helps explain exactly why we talk past each other so often. If we recognize that the other person may simply be seeing another part of the elephant, that their position might be reasonable given their life experience, maybe we could view them in a different light. But here's a real-world example of how this plays out in Jewish terms, from the Israeli writer Yossi Klein Halevi on what he calls Passover Jews and Purim Jews. I didn't think that was funny, but okay. So Halevi points out that both Passover and Purim Jews relate to mitzvot from the Torah regarding memory. The first commandment is to remember, to zachor, that we were strangers in the land of Egypt. We recount this memory, of course, every year at the Passover Seder, and Passover Jews tending towards the liberal side, recalling that we were slaves in Egypt, insist that it is our responsibility and so inherent to what it means to be a Jew, to empathize with and to care for the most oppressed in our society. This aligns with Haidt's first moral foundation, care and compassion. The second mitzvah memory, though, is to remember Amalek, the tribe who attacked the Israelites without provocation when we were wandering through the desert. Amalek attacked the elderly and the stragglers, the weakest in our tribe, in our camp. And the message of that mitzvah of memory is not to be naive, that we have to protect ourselves from outside threats. So Purim Jews, tending towards a conservative outlook, remembering Amalek and his direct descendant Haman, who tried to kill the Israelites and the Jews, Purim Jews would say that Jewish communities need to put our own safety and welfare before helping others. And this aligns with Haidt's third moral foundation, concern for one's own in-group, here, the Jews. But as Jews in 2025, now in 5786, we know that both are correct. We can't be naive about the anti-Semitism encroaching from both the far right and the far left. We can't. We have to protect ourselves. We have to stand up for Jews and Israelis when we are being threatened and marginalized. And yet, as Jews who have been needy and oppressed throughout the centuries, we know that we have a responsibility to care for the most vulnerable in our midst. Is one perspective right and the other perspective wrong? Or are we just touching different parts of the elephant? Professor Jonathan Haidt happens to be Jewish, and even though his model is secular and academic in nature, it's also very Jewish. Disagreement is a Jewish value. We should disagree, and we should share our disagreement with one another, as long as our intentions are constructive, as long as we come to our ideas honestly and earnestly. This is known in Hebrew as machloket l'shem shamayim, or a disagreement that's for the sake of heaven. Pirkei Avot teaches that no one embodied machloket l'shem shamayim more than two schools of thought: the house of Hillel, of college campus fame, and the house of Shammai, two rabbinic schools of thought from 2 millennia ago, who disagreed on basically everything. Over 350 of their disagreements are recorded in the Talmud. That's a lot. Beit Hillel was generally more liberal and open to the influence of the outside world, while Beit Shammai rejected foreign influences and had a much stricter interpretation of Jewish law. They famously disagreed on how to light a Hanukkah menorah. Shammai thought that we should start with all 8 candles lit and reduce by 1 each night. But Hillel believed that we should start with 1, adding another one each night so that we would always be growing in light. And of course, even today, we follow Hillel's custom, Hillel's ruling. But they also disagreed on more serious matters, like who should be eligible to study Torah, the laws for divorce, and so on. The Talmud, the most important book of rabbinic literature, it's not so much a book of laws, but a collection of disagreements about them. Disagreement is part of our Jewish DNA. You all know the phrase, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, right? But why did the rabbis of the Talmud include both the majority and the minority opinions? Why does it retain Shammai's opinion even when the law goes with Hillel's position? The early rabbis must have believed that it's only through disagreement, through airing our ideas and debating them with other people, that we get closer to the truth. Hillel and Shammai were perhaps the most divided of our sages. It's not an exaggeration to say that they were as divided on what it means to be a Jew as Reform Jews and ultra-Orthodox Jews are today. And yet with such a wide gulf between them, the Talmud recounts that their followers would still sit around the table and break bread together, and that their families would still marry one another. They understood that disagreement didn't have to mean dehumanization. What a lesson for today. The thing is, when we actually engage with people that we disagree with, as hard as it may be for us to admit it, and you can ask my wife, it's not easy for me to admit when I am wrong, But hearing the opinion of someone we disagree with can actually help us see when we are incorrect. If we only live in an echo chamber, we'll never know when we have missed the mark. By seeing how another perspective pokes holes in our own, we can suddenly see the shortcomings in our own position. And this point gives new meaning to that old phrase, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, the senior rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York, she says that she always struggled to understand this joke. She reasons, if this joke is supposed to remind us that Jews always disagree, it would suffice to say 2 Jews, 2 opinions. So where does the third opinion come from? She teaches that the third opinion is actually created when those 2 Jews with different opinions come together and argue in a machloket l'shem shamayim, in a constructive argument. She says, by listening to opposing views, they arrive at a conclusion that transcends either of their original positions. And that is the third opinion. When we engage with a person we disagree with, we almost always both come away with an understanding of the issue that is deeper and more nuanced than the one we started with. That insight is precisely what undergirds a national program, Disagree Better, founded by 2 people who disagree about almost everything: taxes, healthcare, social issues, you name it. Our Republican governor, Spencer Cox, and Colorado's Democratic governor, Jared Polis, who happens to be Jewish and maybe he even studied some Talmud. And like 2 Jews, 3 opinions, they insist, quote, disagreeing better isn't just about being nicer to one another. It's about finding a way to disagree that moves us towards solutions rather than deepening divides. It's much easier to sow division than to persuade or find solutions. But we also know, they conclude, that no one ever changed someone's mind by attacking them. So what does this look like in practice? Well, in a moment that many politicians and pundits were using to further divide us, here are the words of our governor, Spencer Cox, that he shared 2 weeks ago after the murder of Charlie Kirk. He said, we can return violence with violence. We can return hate with hate. And that's the problem with political violence. It metastasizes because we could always point the finger at the other side, but we have to find an off-ramp, he says, or it's going to get much, much worse. I still believe in our country. I still believe that there is more good among us than evil. And I still believe that we can change the course of history. I'm hopeful, he says, because Americans can make it so. And I am hopeful too. Because we as Americans have so much more that unites us than divides us. Because we as Jews come from a tradition of people who have disagreed for thousands of years, yet still sat down to get to dinner together, celebrated together, mourned together. And though every day we seem to get more and more stuck in our echo chambers, more divided, in the words of President Bill Clinton, there is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America. But we can't see what is right with each other if we've stopped seeing the humanity in each other, if we have stopped seeing each other at all. So this new year, 5786, may we learn from them. From Hillel and Shammai, from Spencer Cox and Jared Polis, from people with different opinions than our own. May we begin to heal the rifts in our world by letting in more sides of that elephant. And may 2 Jews, 3 opinions be not a joke, but a path forward. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. Shana Tova Tikatevu. Happy New Year. May we all be written in the book of life.